The morning sun cast long shadows across the New Haven colony as children's laughter filled the air. Amy Sullivan ran through the playground, her blonde hair bouncing as she chased her best friend, a young Zephyrian named Kriana, the crystalline. Alien child moved with graceful steps, her body catching the light like a living prism. Jake Sullivan watched his 8-year-old daughter from the security office window, smiled as he saw Amy teaching Kriana how to play hopscotch. The human games always confused the young Zephyrians, but they seemed to enjoy learning them anyway. "Another peaceful day in paradise," said Captain Ben Rodriguez as he joined Jake at the window. Ben had been Jake's friend since their military days and now served as the colony's security chief. "Let's hope it stays that way," Jake replied, though his tone was relaxed. New Haven had been peaceful for 3 years since the humans and Zephyrians had signed their cooperation agreement. The tall, crystal-like aliens had welcomed the human settlers with open arms, eager to learn about their culture. Dr. Lisa Martinez finished her morning rounds at the medical center and walked toward the school building. As the colony's chief medical officer, she made sure to check on the children regularly. The human kids adapted well to the planet's slightly different atmosphere, and the Zephyrian younglings found human medicine fascinating. "Good morning, doctor," Martinez called teacher Nancy from the school entrance. Nancy Williams had volunteered to run the colony's first school, teaching both human and Zephyrian children together. "Morning, Nancy. Ready for today's field trip?" Lisa asked. "The kids are so excited. They've been talking about visiting the Crystal Caves all week," Lisa nodded. The Zephyrian Crystal Caves were one of New Haven's most beautiful natural wonders. The alien children loved showing them to their human friends, and it had become a monthly tradition. Across the settlement, in the Zephyrian Research Center, Veltar adjusted his recording equipment. The tall alien scientist had spent months studying human behavior. Today he planned to conduct his most important experiment yet. Crystalline body hummed with quiet energy as he reviewed his notes. Humans puzzled him greatly. Their attachment to their offspring seemed excessive compared to other species he had studied. Zephyrian parents cared for their young, but once the children could walk and communicate, they joined the community as a whole. Individual parents rarely showed the intense emotional bonds that humans displayed. "This behavior must be studied," Veltar whispered to himself in the harmonic tones of his language. "Perhaps it weakens their species. Perhaps it makes them inefficient." He had watched Jake Sullivan refuse overtime work to attend his daughter's school play. He had seen Lisa Martinez leave important medical conferences early because Amy had a minor fever. Other human parents showed similar patterns, always putting their children's needs before colony duties. Elder Zefkal entered the research center, his ancient crystalline form moving slowly but with dignity. "Veltar, I sense you are planning something today." "Yes, Elder. I wish to understand human parental behavior better. Today's field trip provides the perfect opportunity." The Elder's harmonic voice carried a note of concern. "Be careful, young researcher. Humans may not react as you expect." "I will be gentle," Veltar assured him. "I simply want to observe how quickly human parents can function normally when temporarily separated from their offspring. It will help both our species understand each other better." Elder Zefkal hesitated. In his long life, he had learned that humans often surprised other species with their reactions. But Veltar was a respected scientist, and his research had always been peaceful before. "Very well. But remember, understanding is more important than proving theories." At the school, 15 children gathered for the trip to the Crystal Caves. 8 were human children, including Amy Sullivan, and 7 were young Zephyrians. The guide for today was Mortek, a friendly Zephyrian who had led many such trips before. Amy bounced on her toes with excitement. "Mom, can we bring some crystals home?" Lisa smiled and knelt down to her daughter's level. "Only if Mortek says it's okay, and only small ones that don't hurt the caves." "I promise," Amy said, hugging her mother tightly. Jake arrived just as the children were boarding the transport vehicle. He gave Amy a quick kiss on the forehead. "Have fun, kiddo. Learn lots of cool stuff." "Why will, Dad?" "Kriana says the caves sing when the wind blows through them." "That sounds amazing. Can't wait to hear all about it when you get back." The transport lifted off smoothly, carrying the excited children toward the Crystal Caves 20 miles from the colony. Teacher Nancy sat with the kids, helping them spot interesting landmarks from the air. Veltar followed at a distance in his own vehicle, his equipment ready. He had prepared a mild sedative beam that would cause the children to fall into a peaceful sleep for several hours. It was completely harmless and left no permanent effects. He had tested it extensively on laboratory animals. His plan was simple. He would activate the sedative during the cave tour, when the children were in a safe, enclosed area. The Zephyrian guides would assume the children were simply tired and let them rest. Meanwhile, Veltar would observe how the human parents reacted to their children's delayed return. He expected some worry, of course. But he believed that after a few hours, the parents would adapt and continue with their daily duties. This would prove his theory that human parental attachment was not as strong as it appeared. The crystal caves stretched deep into the planet's crust, filled with formations that had grown for thousands of years. The Zephyrian crystals naturally resonated with harmonic frequencies, creating beautiful music when air moved through the caverns. "Listen," Mortek told the children as they entered the first chamber. The caves sang with gentle musical tones that made the human children gasp with wonder. Amy held Creona's hand as they walked deeper into the caves. The crystalline walls reflected their lights in amazing patterns, creating rainbows that danced on every surface. "It's like being inside a giant musical instrument," said Tommy Chen, another 8-year-old human boy. "The crystals grow very slowly," Mortek explained. "Some of these formations are older than your entire colony." Veltar positioned himself in a hidden alcove, his sedative device aimed at the group. He activated his recording equipment and waited for the right moment. The children gathered around a particularly large crystal formation that hummed with deep, resonant tones. They were all together focused on Mortek's explanation of how the crystals formed. Veltar activated his device. The sedative beam was invisible and silent. One by one, the human children began to yawn. Amy rubbed her eyes sleepily. Ami sat down on the cave floor, suddenly feeling very tired. "I'm sleepy," said little Maria Santos, a 6-year-old girl. The young Zephyrians also felt the effects, though their crystalline bodies processed the sedative differently. They became calm and quiet, but remained awake within minutes. All 8 human children had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep on the cave floor. Mortek looked confused. "This is unusual. Human children do not usually sleep during cave tours." The Zephyrian younglings helped make the sleeping human children comfortable, assuming they were simply tired from the excitement of the trip. Teacher Nancy tried to wake Amy gently, but the little girl remained fast asleep. She checked the other human children and found them all in the same condition. "We should return to the colony," she told Mortek. "Something might be wrong." The transport was not large enough to safely carry 8 sleeping children. Mortek made the decision to let them rest in the cave's visitor center, a safe building at the cave entrance. "I will contact the colony and explain the delay," told Nancy. At the research center, Veltar watched his readings with satisfaction. The sedative was working perfectly. The children would sleep for several more hours, giving him time to observe the human parents' reactions. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his scientific career. Back at New Haven Colony, Jake Sullivan checked his watch. The field trip should have returned an hour ago. Small worry began growing in his chest, though he told himself that cave tours sometimes ran late. Lisa finished her afternoon appointments and walked to the school, expecting to pick up Amy. Instead, she found the building empty except for the staff. "Where are the children?" she asked Nancy's assistant. "Field trip hasn't returned yet." Mortek sent a message saying they were delayed, but that was 2 hours ago. Lisa felt her heart rate increase. Amy was never late without a very good reason. Jake's communication device buzzed. It was Lisa. "Jake, the kids aren't back yet. Something's wrong." The worry in his wife's voice made Jake's protective instincts flare to life. He immediately left his office and headed for the school. He had no idea that across the settlement, Veltar was calmly taking notes on what he considered the beginning of a fascinating experiment in human behavior. The innocent alien scientist was about to learn something. It's about humans that no research could have prepared him for. Jake Sullivan arrived at the school building just as Lisa was trying to contact Mortek on the communication system. Other parents had begun gathering in the main hallway, their faces showing the same mixture of concern and confusion. Any word from the field trip? asked Carol Davis, whose 7-year-old son Peter was part of the group. Mortek sent one message about a delay, but that was 3 hours ago, Lisa replied, her medical training keeping her voice steady despite the growing fear in her chest. Jake pulled up the colony's tracking system on his portable device. Every transport vehicle carried a location beacon for safety purposes. The signal showed that Mortek's vehicle was still at the Crystal Caves, exactly where it should be. The transport hasn't moved, he told the other parents. Maybe they're just having trouble with the communication system. But even as he said it, Jake didn't believe his own words. Mortek was an experienced guide who had never been late before. Something was wrong. Captain Ben Rodriguez joined the group, his security uniform making the parents feel slightly better. I've been monitoring our communications. No distress signals, no emergency beacons. The transport's power systems are all functioning normally. Then why haven't they called? Demanded Frank Santos, Maria's father. The stocky construction worker's hands were clenched into fists. I'm organizing a search party, Ben announced. We'll take 2 vehicles and go to the caves. It's probably just a simple communication breakdown. Jake immediately volunteered, as did Frank Santos and 2 other fathers. Lisa wanted to come too, but someone needed to stay at the colony in case the children returned on their own. As the search party prepared to leave, Lisa felt a strange sensation in her stomach. It was more than worry now. Her body was reacting as if Amy was in real danger, even though logic told her the children were probably fine. At the Crystal Caves, Mortek paced nervously outside the visitor center. The human children had been sleeping. For 4 hours now, far longer than any normal nap. He had tried everything to wake them, but they remained in deep sleep. Teacher Nancy sat beside Amy, gently stroking the little girl's hair. This isn't natural sleep, she told Mortek. Something is very wrong. The young Zephyrian children were also worried. They had never seen human children sleep so deeply during the day. Kriana kept trying to shake Amy awake, her crystalline fingers making soft chiming sounds as she moved. Should we carry them to the transport? Mortek asked. Moving unconscious children could be dangerous, Nancy replied. We need medical help. Mortek tried his communication system again, but something was interfering with the signal. He didn't know that Veltar was using a dampening field to prevent outside contact during his experiment. Meanwhile, Veltar observed everything from his hidden position. He was surprised by how long the human children were sleeping, but his equipment showed they were perfectly healthy. Their breathing was normal, their heart rates were steady, and brain scans indicated they were simply in a very deep sleep. What fascinated him more was the behavior of the Zephyrian children and adults. They seemed genuinely distressed by the human children's condition. Veltar had expected them to simply wait patiently, but instead they showed signs of real concern. Interesting, he noted in his research log. Zephyrian empathy responses are stronger than predicted when observing distressed human offspring. Back at the colony, the search party reached the caves just as the sun was setting. Jake jumped out of the vehicle before it fully stopped and ran toward the visitor center. Inside, he found Amy lying on a soft mat, still fast asleep. His heart hammered in his chest as he knelt beside her and checked her pulse. It was strong and steady, but she wouldn't wake up no matter how gently he tried to rouse her. What happened to them? Jake asked Mortek, his voice tight with controlled panic. They became tired during the cave tour, the Zephyrian guide explained. All the human children fell asleep at the same time. I thought perhaps they were exhausted from excitement, but they will not wake up. Frank Santos was holding his daughter Maria, tears streaming down his face. She's breathing fine, but look at her. She's like she's in a coma. Captain Ben Rodriguez examined the scene with his security. Training. 8 human children, all unconscious at the same time, with no obvious cause. The Zephyrian children were awake and alert. Something had specifically affected only the humans. This wasn't an accident, Ben said quietly to Jake. Someone did this deliberately. Jake felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. Someone had hurt his daughter. Someone had hurt all their children. The rational part of his mind told him to stay calm and investigate properly. But another part, a deeper part that he didn't even know existed, was beginning to wake up. The search party carefully loaded the sleeping children into their vehicles. Jake held Amy in his arms during the ride back, whispering to her that everything would be okay. But she didn't respond at all. When they arrived at the colony, word spread quickly. Every parent, every adult, every person who had ever smiled at these children gathered at the medical center, Dr. Lisa. Martinez immediately began examining each child with every piece of equipment she had. Their vital signs are perfect, she announced to the waiting crowd. Heart rate, breathing, brain activity, everything is completely normal. They're just in an extremely deep sleep. But what caused it? Asked Carol Davis. I don't know yet. I'm running tests for toxins, gases, anything that might have affected them. Elder Zefkal arrived at the medical center, his ancient crystalline form moving with unusual haste. He had heard about the sleeping human children and was deeply concerned. This is most unusual, he told Lisa. In all our years on this planet, we have never seen anything like this happen in the crystal caves. Jake looked at the elder with new suspicion. You're saying this has never happened before to any children? Never. The caves are completely safe. We have taken thousands of younglings there over the centuries. What had happened to human children? Jake said, his voice getting colder. Human children. The elder's harmonic tones carried worry. You believe this was intentional? I believe someone targeted our kids specifically. Word spread beyond the colony. Lisa sent emergency messages to the nearest human settlements, asking for medical advice. Jake contacted the Galactic Defense Force, reporting what might be an attack on human civilians. By midnight, the entire colony was awake. No one could sleep while their children lay unconscious. Parents took turns sitting with the kids, monitoring their breathing, checking their pulse, hoping for any sign of awakening. Lisa hadn't left the medical center in 8 hours. She ran test after test, trying to find what had caused this condition, but every result came back normal. Whatever had affected the children was unlike anything in her medical databases. Jake stood in the colony's command center, staring at sensor readings and communication logs. Captain Ben Rodriguez worked beside him, both men trying to find any clue about what had happened. The communication interference started right around the time the children fell asleep, Ben reported. Someone was jamming the signals from the cave area. Jamming signals and sedating children, Jake said. This was planned. Frank Santos joined them, his eyes red from crying. My little girl has never slept this deeply in her life. When Maria was a baby, even thunder couldn't keep her asleep this long. Other parents gathered around them. Carol Davis held her husband's hand tightly. We need to find who did this. We will, Jake promised, and something in his voice made everyone look at him. The mild-mannered colony commander was gone. In his place stood someone harder, colder, more focused. Dr. Lisa Martinez entered the command center, her face pale with exhaustion. I've contacted every human medical facility. Within 50 light years, no one has seen anything like this before. What about non-human medical knowledge? Ben asked. Lisa shook her head. The Zephyrians don't have any medical conditions that could cause this, and they've been nothing but helpful. Jake looked around at the faces of his friends and neighbors. These people had trusted him to keep their families safe. Their children were unconscious because of some unknown attack. And he didn't even know where to start looking for answers. But he was going to find those answers. And when he found whoever had done this to their children, they were going to learn something about human nature that they clearly didn't understand. Across the settlement, Veltar was beginning to realize that his experiment wasn't going according to plan. The human parents hadn't adapted to their children's absence. Instead, they had become more focused, more determined, more united than he had ever seen them. His instruments showed that the sedative should wear off within the next few hours. The children would wake up naturally, completely unharmed. He had planned to observe the joyful reunion and then reveal his research to help both species understand each other better. But as he watched the humans working through the night, organizing searches, calling for help, refusing to rest until their children were safe, Veltar began to understand that he had made a terrible miscalculation. He had wanted to study human parental behavior. Instead, he had awakened something in them that he didn't recognize and didn't understand. And he was starting to feel very afraid of what that something might do when it found him. Dawn broke over New Haven colony, but none of the human parents had slept. They moved through the settlement like ghosts, their eyes red from crying and exhaustion, but their purpose growing harder with each passing hour. Jake Sullivan stood in the communication center, speaking with Admiral Kate Morgan of the Galactic Defense Force. The Admiral's image flickered on the holographic display, her weathered face showing the kind of experience that came from decades of dealing with threats. Across the galaxy? Admiral, we need help, Jake said simply. Someone attacked our children, and we don't know who or why. Admiral Morgan studied Jake's face through the transmission. She had seen that look before, in the eyes of parents whose children had been taken by raiders or slavers. It was a look that made even seasoned military officers step carefully. I'm bringing a small fleet, Commander Sullivan. We'll be there in 18 hours. A fleet might not be necessary, Jake began, but the Admiral cut him off. Commander, I've been dealing with threats to human colonies for 20 years. When someone targets our children, it's never just a local problem. I'm bringing backup. After the transmission ended, Captain Ben Rodriguez approached Jake with a data tablet. I've been analyzing the sensor readings from yesterday. Look at this. The tablet showed energy patterns from the time when the children fell asleep. There was a faint signature, barely detectable, but clearly artificial. Someone was using advanced technology near the caves, Ben explained. This wasn't a natural occurrence or an accident. Someone deliberately put our kids to sleep. Jake felt the cold anger in his chest grow stronger. Any idea what kind of technology? The energy signature is similar to Zephyrian science, but more advanced. Whoever did this knows how their systems work. Dr. Lisa Martinez joined them, her medical coat wrinkled from spending the night checking on the children. Any change? Jake asked hopefully. Lisa shook her head. They're still sleeping, but their brain activity is starting to increase. I think they might wake up soon. That's good news, Ben said. Maybe, Lisa replied, her voice worried. Or maybe, whoever did this is planning to make their move when the children wake up. Across the settlement, Elder Zephkal called an emergency meeting of the Zephyrian Council. The ancient alien leaders gathered in their crystal chamber, their harmonic voices filled with concern. The humans are changing, Elder Zephkal reported. Their behavior is becoming more focused, more dangerous. I fear we may have underestimated their protective instincts. Council member Tafara says crystalline body chimed with worry. Should we contact our homeworld for advice? Not yet. First, we must determine if any of our people are responsible for this incident. The elder's words sent ripples of shock through the council. The idea that a Zephyrian might have harmed the human children was almost unthinkable. Begin a quiet investigation, Elder Zephkal ordered. Check all research projects, all equipment usage, anything that might explain what happened to those children. In his hidden research facility, Veltar watched his instruments with growing panic. The human children should have awakened hours ago, but the sedative was lasting much longer than he had calculated. Effect would wear off in 8 hours at most. But it had been nearly 20 hours now. Worse. His monitoring equipment showed that human reinforcements were arriving at the colony. Ships were approaching from multiple directions, filled with people he hadn't expected. Veltar pulled up his communication logs and nearly fell over in shock. The humans hadn't just called for medical help. They had sent messages across half the galaxy, asking for assistance from every human settlement within range, and those settlements were responding. The first ship arrived just after noon. Captain Danny Wright brought his mining vessel down in the colony's landing area, followed immediately by his wife Carol Tucker and a team of engineers. Jake met them at the landing pad. Danny, what are you doing here? Your mining operation is 3 systems away. Danny Wright was a big man with calloused hands and tired eyes. Got word that someone took kids. Carol and I, we lost our boy to raiders 5 years ago. Never again. Carol Tucker stepped forward, her engineering tools already in hand. We've dealt with kidnappers before. We know how to track them, how to find them. More ships arrived throughout the afternoon. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker came with a team of specialists from the outer colonies. Captain Ruth Adams brought her security force from the trading stations. Each ship carried people with the same look in their eyes that Jake was beginning to recognize in himself. By evening, nearly 200 humans had arrived at New Haven Colony. They came from mining operations, trading posts, research stations, and military outposts scattered across dozens of star systems. Admiral Morgan's fleet arrived just as the sun was setting. 3 destroyers and a heavy cruiser took positions around the planet. Their weapon systems powered, but not targeted at anything specific. Jake met Admiral Morgan at the landing pad as she disembarked from her shuttle. The Admiral was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Status report, Commander," she said without preamble. "The children are still unconscious, but Dr. Martinez thinks they'll wake up soon. We've identified that someone used advanced technology to sedate them, and we've confirmed that the attack was deliberate and targeted specifically at human children." Admiral Morgan nodded grimly. "Any suspects?" Jake hesitated. "The energy signature suggests someone with access to Zephyrian technology, but the Zephyrians seem as concerned as we are." "Seem concerned," the Admiral repeated. "Commander Sullivan, someone put your children in danger?" "I don't care how concerned they seem. We're going to find out who did this." The Admiral's arrival seemed to be a signal for the humans in the colony. Parents who had been holding back their fear and anger for almost 2 days suddenly felt like they had permission to act. Jake found himself at the center of something he didn't fully understand. Parents from across the galaxy were looking to him for direction, their faces showing the same cold determination that he felt growing inside himself. "We need to search every building, every facility, every piece of equipment on this planet," Jake announced to the gathered humans. "Someone here has technology advanced enough to put our children in artificial sleep. We're going to find them." Captain Ben Rodriguez had been working with the newly arrived specialists to analyze every scrap of data from the cave incident. "The communication jamming came from somewhere in the colony itself," he reported. "Whoever did this is still here." Frank Santos stepped forward, his construction crew behind him. "My people know every building in this settlement. We built most of them. We can search faster than anyone." "My engineers can scan for unusual energy signatures," Carol Tucker added. "If someone's hiding advanced equipment, we'll find it." The Zephyrians watched with growing alarm as the humans organized themselves into search teams. What had been a peaceful, cooperative colony was transforming into something that looked disturbingly like a military operation. "Elder." Zefcall approached Jake as the search teams prepared to deploy. "Commander Sullivan, surely this level of response is excessive. Your children are safe and will wake soon." Jake looked at the Elder, and for the first time, the alien saw something in human eyes that made his crystalline body tremble. "Elder, someone put my daughter to sleep against her will. Someone made my wife cry for 20 hours straight. Someone brought parents from across the galaxy here because their children are in danger." Jake's voice was quiet, but every human in hearing range turned to listen. "We're going to find who did this. When we do, they're going to learn something about humans that apparently they didn't know before." The Elder stepped back, suddenly understanding that the humans were no longer the cooperative, peaceful neighbors they had been yesterday. Something fundamental had changed in them, and he wasn't sure it could be changed back. At the medical center, Dr. Lisa Martinez noticed the first signs of change in the sleeping children. Amy's eyelids were beginning to flutter, and her breathing was becoming less deep. "They're starting to wake up," she announced over the communication system. Throughout the colony, every human stopped what they were doing and turned toward the medical center. Parents began running, leaving their search duties behind, desperate to see their children open their eyes. But the search teams continued their work. Other humans, those without children in the colony, kept looking for whoever was responsible. They had come from across the galaxy for this, and they weren't leaving until they had answers. In his research facility, Beltar realized that his experiment had spiraled completely out of control. What he had intended as a simple study of human parental behavior had brought armed warships to his planet and turned a peaceful colony into something that looked like a military base. He watched through his monitoring equipment as search teams moved through the settlement, scanning buildings and interviewing every Zephyrian they could find. It wouldn't be long before they reached his facility. Veltar had two choices. He could reveal himself now and try to explain that this had all been a misunderstanding, a scientific experiment that had gone wrong. Or he could try to hide until the humans left. But as he watched Jake Sullivan coordinating search teams with the cold efficiency of a hunt, Amy Sullivan's eyes opened slowly, blinking against the bright lights of the medical center. For a moment, she looked confused, unsure of where she was or why her parents were crying as they hugged her. "Mommy, Daddy, what's wrong?" Her small voice cutting through the celebration around her, Jake held his daughter, so tightly that she giggled and squirmed in his arms. "Nothing's wrong now, sweetheart. Nothing's wrong now." One by one, the other human children began waking up. Tommy Chen sat up and rubbed his eyes. Maria Santos smiled sleepily at her father Frank, who was crying too hard to speak. Asked for water and wanted to know why so many people were in the medical center. Dr. Lisa Martinez checked each child carefully, running quick tests to make sure they were completely recovered. "They're all fine," she announced to the crowded room. "No side effects, no lasting damage. Whatever put them to sleep is completely out of their systems now." The relief in the room was overwhelming. Parents laughed and cried and held their children, grateful beyond words that they were safe. But even as they celebrated, the anger remained. Someone had done this to their children, and that someone was still out there. Admiral Morgan watched the reunion for a few minutes, then quietly stepped outside with Jake and Captain Ben Rodriguez. "The children are safe, but we still have a problem," she said. "Someone attacked human children with advanced technology. That can't go unanswered." Jake nodded, his relief at Amy's recovery already being replaced by cold determination. "Do we have any new leads?" Ben checked his data tablet. "Search teams have covered 60% of the colony. We found 3 locations with unusual energy signatures, but 2 of them turned out to be normal Zephyrian communication equipment, and the third still investigating. It's in the research district, in a facility that's supposed to be empty." Admiral Morgan's expression hardened. "Show me." Across the colony, the news that the children were awake spread quickly. But instead of celebrating, the humans who had come from other systems became more focused. Their job wasn't finished until they found who was responsible. Captain Danny Wright and his wife Carol. Tucker led a team of engineers toward the research district. They carried scanning equipment that could detect any technology more advanced than basic Zephyrian systems. "Contact," Carol announced as they approached a building that looked abandoned from the outside. "Major energy signatures inside. Someone's running a lot of equipment in there." Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker joined them with his security team. These were humans who had dealt with child traffickers and raiders before. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who knew how dangerous their work could be. "Building plans show this facility was supposed to be decommissioned last year," Steve reported. "No one should be using it." Inside the hidden research facility, Veltar panicked as his sensors detected the approaching humans. They were moving in organized groups, using scanning equipment that was more sophisticated than anything he had. Expected from a simple colony, he tried to shut down his equipment and hide the evidence of his experiment, but it was too late. The humans were already at his door. Elder Zephkal arrived at the research district, just as the human teams were preparing to enter the suspicious building. The ancient alien moved faster than Jake had ever seen him move before. "Wait," the elder called out. "This building belongs to our research division. Perhaps I should go in first and speak with whoever is inside." Admiral Morgan looked at the elder with cold suspicion. "You know who's in there?" "Suspect it may be one of our scientists. If so, there may be a simple explanation for all of this." Jake stepped forward and his voice carried a tone that made everyone stop and listen. "Elder, if one of your people put my daughter to sleep for 24 hours, if one of your people made parents come from across the galaxy because they thought our children were in danger, then there is no simple explanation." The elder's crystalline body trembled as he realized how completely the situation had changed. These were not the same humans who had arrived at New Haven 3 years ago, eager to cooperate and build a peaceful community. These humans had become something harder, more dangerous. "Please," the elder said. Let me speak with them first. Violence will not help anyone. Admiral Morgan considered this for a moment. You have 5 minutes to get whoever is in there to come out and surrender. Peacefully. After that, we're going in. The elder approached the building and spoke in the harmonic tones of his language. Veltar, I know you are in there. The humans have found you.
Yes.
You must come out now and explain yourself. Inside the facility, Veltar realized he had run out of options. Through his monitoring equipment, he could see dozens of armed humans surrounding the building. Their faces showed a cold anger that terrified him more than any weapon. He had wanted to study human protective instincts. Now he was about to experience them firsthand. Slowly, Veltar opened the door to his facility and stepped outside. The tall, crystalline alien looked small and fragile compared to the humans who immediately surrounded him. I am Veltar, researcher. Of interspecies behavior, he said, his harmonic voice shaking with fear. I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Jake Sullivan stepped forward. Veltar could see something in the human's eyes that made his entire body resonate with terror. You're the one who put our children to sleep? It was an experiment, Veltar said quickly. Harmless study of human parental behavior. I never intended any harm. The children were never in danger. The silence that followed was more frightening than any shout would have been. Every human present stared at Veltar with the same cold expression. Admiral. Morgan spoke first, her voice deadly quiet. You conducted an experiment on our children without permission? I wanted to understand human attachment patterns, Veltar explained desperately. In Zephyrian culture, parents do not show such intense emotional bonds with their offspring. I theorized that this behavior might be inefficient for human society. Frank Santos stepped forward, his large hands clenched into fists. You made my little girl unconscious for a day to prove a point. The sedative was completely harmless, Veltar insisted. I tested it extensively. There were no side effects, no permanent damage. Captain Danny Wright's voice cut through the crowd. You tested it on our kids like they were laboratory animals? Veltar realized that his explanations were only making things worse. The humans weren't interested in his scientific methods or his theoretical research. They only cared that he had hurt their children. I apologize, he said. I did not understand the severity of human parental emotions. I will submit to whatever punishment you deem appropriate. Jake looked at Veltar for a long moment, then turned to Admiral Morgan. What's the standard penalty for conducting unauthorized experiments on human civilians? Imprisonment? Usually. Maybe 10 to 15 years, depending on the harm caused. And for targeting children specifically? The Admiral's smile was not pleasant. That's considered a special circumstance. Much longer sentences. Elder Zephkal stepped forward, his ancient voice filled with shame. The Zephyrian Council will cooperate fully with any investigation. Veltar acted without authorization. Research was not approved by our government. Admiral Morgan nodded. Good, we'll be conducting a full investigation of this facility and all of Veltar's research. We want to know exactly what he did, how he did it, and whether anyone else was involved. As the human security teams began documenting everything in Veltar's facility, more ships arrived in orbit around New Haven. Word had spread through human space about what had happened, and more parents were coming to make sure the threat was dealt with properly. Captain Steve Parker approached Jake with a data tablet. Admiral, we found something interesting in his research files. Veltar has been studying human behavior for months, documenting our routines, our family patterns, our security procedures. Preparing for his experiment, Jake said grimly. Or preparing for something worse. This level of surveillance could have been used for much more serious attacks. Admiral Morgan looked at the evidence, then at Veltar, who was now being held under guard while his facility was searched. This wasn't just a misguided experiment. This was a systematic study of our weaknesses. Jake felt the cold anger in his chest grow even stronger. This alien hadn't just hurt their children on impulse. He had planned it, studied them, prepared for it like they were subjects in a laboratory. What happens now? Frank Santos asked. Admiral Morgan looked around at the faces of the humans who had come from across the galaxy for this moment. Parents, security officers, engineers, traders, miners, all united by one simple fact. Someone had threatened human children. Now, she said, we make sure this never happens again. We make sure everyone in the galaxy understands what happens when you mess with our kids. Veltar listened to this conversation with growing horror. He had thought his experiment would help both species understand each other better. Instead, he had awakened something in humanity that he was beginning to realize might change how every species in the galaxy looked at humans. He had wanted to study human nature. He was about to become a lesson about it. 3 days after the children woke up, Jake Sullivan stood in the colony's main assembly hall, looking out at a crowd unlike anything New Haven had ever seen. Representatives from 47 human colonies filled the room, along with Admiral Morgan's senior staff and several alien diplomats, who had come to witness what would happen next. Veltar sat in a containment field at the front of the room, his crystalline body dim with shame and fear. Elder Zefkal stood beside him, ready to speak for his people and accept whatever judgment the humans would render. Amy Sullivan sat in the front row with the other children who had been affected by Veltar's experiment. They seemed completely recovered, laughing and playing as if nothing had happened. But their parents watched, Veltar with eyes that had not softened since the day their children fell asleep. Admiral Morgan stepped to the center of the room. We're here to decide what happens to Veltar of the Zephyrian Research Division, who conducted unauthorized experiments on human children. She gestured to the evidence displays around the room. The investigation is complete. Veltar used advanced sedative technology to render 8 human children unconscious for over 24 hours. He monitored their families for months beforehand, studying human behavior patterns and security procedures. Captain Ben Rodriguez stood and addressed the crowd. The evidence shows this was not a simple mistake or cultural misunderstanding. Veltar planned this experiment carefully, knowing it would cause distress to human parents. Frank Santos rose from his seat, his voice carrying the anger of every parent in the room. He used our children like laboratory animals. He made them unconscious and watched us suffer, all to prove some theory about human emotions. Elder Zefkal stepped forward, his harmonic voice filled with regret. The Zephyrian Council formally apologizes for Veltar's actions. His research was not authorized by our government. We are prepared to accept full responsibility and make whatever reparations you require. Admiral Morgan looked at the elder with something that might have been respect. Your cooperation is noted and appreciated. But this isn't about money or reparations. She turned to face Veltar directly. You wanted to study human protective instincts. You thought our attachment to our children was a weakness, something inefficient that needed to be understood and maybe corrected. Veltar's crystalline form trembled as he tried to respond. I never intended harm. I believed I was conducting valuable research that would benefit both our species. Research, Jake Sullivan said, standing slowly. You call what you did research. Jake's voice was quiet, but everyone in the room leaned forward to listen. Let me tell you what your research accomplished, Veltar.
Ow.
You brought 300 humans from across the galaxy to this planet. Mining crews abandoned their operations. Trading ships left their routes. Military vessels changed their patrol schedules. All because word spread that someone had hurt human children. Captain Danny Wright stood up from his seat. My wife and I lost our boy to raiders 5 years ago. When we heard about what happened here, we dropped everything and came. We weren't going to let it happen to another family. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker joined him. I've spent 10 years hunting child traffickers across the outer colonies. When the call went out that kids were in danger, every parent in my sector volunteered to help. One by one, more humans stood up around the room. Carol Tucker, Ruth Adams, dozens of others who had come from across human space when they heard. Children were threatened. Admiral Morgan gestured to the crowd. This is what you discovered with your experiment, Veltar.
Ow.
Human parents don't just protect their own children. Protect all human children, everywhere, no matter the cost. Veltar looked around the room with growing understanding.
But
No idea the response would be so extensive. That's the point, Jake said. You saw human attachment to children as something to study and understand, but it's not just attachment, it's a promise. Every human parent makes the same promise, that no child will be harmed while we can prevent it. Dr. Lisa Martinez stood and addressed Veltar directly. You monitored my family for months. You watched me leave work early when Amy had a fever. You saw Jake miss meetings to attend her school plays. You thought this made us weak and inefficient. She gestured to the crowded room. Look around. Does this look weak to you? You hurt 8 children, and 300 adults came to make sure it never happens again, Elder. Zefkal's crystalline body chimed with what sounded like awe, the beginning to understand. Human children are not just the responsibility of their parents. They are protected by your entire species. Now, you're learning, Admiral Morgan said. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge? She turned back to Veltar. You could be tried for assault, kidnapping, conducting illegal experiments on sentient beings. The penalties would be severe. Decades in prison, maybe longer. Veltar's harmonic voice was barely audible. Accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate. Jake looked at his daughter Amy, who was playing quietly with her friend Creona. The young Zephyrian, completely unaware of the serious discussion happening around her. Then he looked back at Veltar. I don't want you in prison, Jake said, surprising. Everyone in the room? Prison won't teach anyone anything useful. Frank Santos looked confused. Jake, he hurt our kids. Yes, he did. And now every species in this sector is going to hear about what happened when he hurt our kids. Jake's voice grew stronger. They're going to hear about mining crews that abandoned their operations to help. About traders who left profitable routes. About military fleets that crossed the galaxy because children were in danger. Admiral Morgan smiled, beginning to understand Jake's thinking. You want to make him an example? I want to make him a teacher, Jake corrected. Veltar spent months studying human behavior. Now he's going to spend years teaching other species what he learned. Jake addressed Veltar directly. You're going to write reports about what happened here. You're going to document every ship that came, every parent who volunteered, every human who dropped their lives to help children they'd never met. And you're going to make sure every alien researcher in the galaxy understands what happens when you threaten human children. Veltar looked up with something that might have been relief. You want me to continue my research? I want you to finish. Your research, Jake said. You started studying human protective instincts. Now you're going to study them properly, with respect and understanding, instead of treating us like laboratory subjects. Dr. Lisa Martinez nodded approvingly. Your research could actually be valuable if it's done right. Other species need to understand how humans react when our children are threatened. Elder Zefkal stepped forward. The Zephyrian Council would support this arrangement. Veltar's work could prevent future misunderstandings between species. Admiral. Morgan looked around the room, gauging the mood of the assembled humans. All in favor of this alternative to imprisonment. Hands rose throughout the assembly. Not everyone was happy with the decision, but most seemed to understand the wisdom of it. The sentence is decided, Admiral Morgan announced. Veltar will spend the next 5 years documenting human protective behavior and publishing his findings for all species to study. He will work under supervision and will never again conduct experiments on sentient beings without full informed consent. Veltar's crystalline form brightened slightly. I accept these terms gratefully. I will ensure that my research serves to build understanding rather than exploit it. As the assembly began to disperse, parents gathered their children for the journey home. Many of the humans who had come from other colonies were finally ready to return to their own lives. Satisfied that the threat had been dealt with, Amy Sullivan ran up to her father as he was speaking with other parents. Daddy, Creona wants to know if we're still friends with the Zephyrians. Jake looked down at his daughter, then over at Creona, who was staying close to Elder Zefkal. Of course we are, sweetheart. One person made a mistake, but that doesn't mean we can't be friends with everyone else. Amy smiled and ran back to play with Creona. The two children resuming their friendship as if nothing had happened. Captain Danny approached Jake as he was preparing to leave. I think this will really prevent future incidents? Jake watched. Amy and Creona playing together, then looked up at the ships in orbit that were beginning to depart for their home systems. Word travels fast in space, Danny. By next month, every species in this sector will know what happened when someone messed with human children. And they'll know that we don't just get angry, Admiral Morgan added. We get organized. We drop everything to help each other. We bring friends. Frank Santos laughed, though it wasn't entirely a happy sound. Poor Veltar thought he was studying weakness. Instead, he discovered our greatest strength. As the last ships departed New Haven colony, life slowly returned to normal. The Zephyrians implemented new research protocols that required full consent and oversight for any studies involving other species. Veltar began his new work, documenting not just what had happened, but why humans had reacted the way they did. His first report, titled Human Protective Instincts, a case study in species-wide cooperation, became required reading at diplomatic academies across the galaxy. It included detailed documentation of how quickly